Hello everybody. Today what we're going to be going through is how to use Power Query to set up a reporting structure on some folder group with files in it. So this is one of the most powerful and useful automations that I've found across the organizations that I've used. I use it everywhere. I do it multiple times with a bunch of different setups. So very powerful. Use of kind of our different tools here that we're going to be setting up. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be connecting our Power BI model to a folder that contains a daily export of some systems data. Some data that I've replicated and dummied up. As an example for this one is LinkedIn data. So LinkedIn doesn't have a good way for organizations to connect to their data, right? They don't really like people scraping. They don't have an API available. So all you can do is kind of export your stuff. You can only export a report based on some specific parameters you give it. So what you can set up is you can set up automation to, instead of having yourself go out to grab that report and do some analysis on each day's report, you can set up a folder, and within that folder have the export moved into that folder every day. And once that file is in that folder every day, we can then report on it in Power BI and have our refreshes set up so that we never ever have to touch that manual export ever again, and all of it's done through Power Query and our gateways. So for instance, let's say that this is how, again, just sticking to LinkedIn as an example, this is how that report will come out, right? So you can name it whatever you want in automation, but it was nice and convenient. I didn't need to name it anything, so I didn't need to add any step there. So if this is how your report comes out, how do we get this type of reporting into a reportable structure? So we've got a date in here. Let's pull the file up. We've got a date in here, and we've got some user ID, right? So we've got a date, we've got a user ID, and then we have some metrics. But it's only on individual daily files. How do we timestamp it? How do we get the users related to each other? How do we go about doing this? So that's what we're going to walk through right now. I'm going to show you how to do it either through a OneDrive folder. So if you want to keep everything kind of universal and everybody in your organization can connect to the data and have it be a more shareable workspace, more manageable also, OneDrive or the SharePoint connection is where you want to go. Or if you just want quick ease of access, you can also just set it up locally with a local folder. All right, so now let's get into it. So what we're going to want to do is push on the Transform Data button. Again, this is where we're going to be doing all of our Power Queries. So again, I've got that base date table in there. And what we're going to want to do is let's first go out and grab our folder from our local, just because it's a bit easier. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the New Sources button and go to More. On our Get Data screen, what we're going to want to do is we're going to select the folder option, because again, we're connecting to a full folder, right? This is the entire folder that we're going to connect to, because we want every file within this folder. So we're going to select the folder, connect, and then just browse out to that folder path. Demo, daily export. So once you've browsed out to the folder path, go ahead and push OK. And then once you push OK, the screen that you're going to be brought to is going to be the Transform and Combine window. So what we want to do is we don't want to combine our data just yet. What we want to do, so this is a good step to do typically, but I want to show you what this exactly does. So for our purposes, we're going to go ahead and push Transform Data. Typically, you can push this button and it'll do everything for you, but we're going to push Transform Data. So when we push Transform Data, what this is going to do is this is going to get us to a screen that essentially is our folder. So we have essentially pulled up our folder within Power BI, and then Power BI just displays it and reads kind of that folder structure just a bit differently, right? So instead of showing name, date modified, type, size, it just shows it kind of in this format. So again, very similar, very normal looking view. Let's connect to this through SharePoint though. Let's see what it looks like through SharePoint. SharePoint connection's a bit funky, so stick with me. It can be very tricky to work with. I don't know why it's so challenging sometimes, especially since it's Microsoft, but whatever. So go ahead and push, again, New Source, and we're going to go select SharePoint folder and push Connect. And so this is where it gets a bit weird. So what we're going to want to do here is on our SharePoint folder, instead of taking the full URL, We don't want the full URL. That's not going to give us a valid URL for the connection. What we want to do is just go up to the underscore com. So underscore com at the end of personal, or wherever you are, is where you want to go. So it's before the layout, essentially, is what you want to copy. That's going to be our URL that we're going to enter in. Oh, so on our URL for SharePoint, go ahead and paste that in there. And so again, you can see we're going to get that same looking screen. So very similar to how we connect to the folder, but instead of connecting to the folder, we're just connected to a OneDrive location. So let's say that we're not running the automation through our computer, so we can't access the OneDrive file for our computer. Somebody else is running it and putting the file in this OneDrive location. So great, still not an issue for us. We can still connect to the data that we're getting and go through our process. Again, push the transform button, and again, you can see that these look identical. So the only difference here is going to be our folder path, right? So our folder path on our SharePoint connection is going to be that SharePoint site that we entered in, that SharePoint link. And then on our file, it's just going to be our local file path, right? But one thing I wanted to show you on the SharePoint side is within this folder. So again, since you don't specify exactly which folder it is and you only give it the SharePoint site, within that folder there could be other folders, right? So you just need to make sure how you're organizing that data is right. So just make sure whenever you're pulling on the folder that you're pulling in the correct folder, and you can specify it very easily. So I have two folders in our SharePoint file, right? So we have two folders in there. We've got a daily export demo, which is what we want. So this contains all of our actual files that we want to look at, and then a bad folder data. So then 3 files that we do not want to include. So the way that we can filter those out is, again, going back to Power Query, we can just filter it out on the folder path. So on the folder path, we'll just only select, unfortunately this gets cut off, so it's kind of funky. We'll just select the folder path that does not contain the bad data. So you can see right here we do not have that bad data one. So if I just select this other one, we can see that this is going to be the bad data file, right? So this is going to be the 3 that we do not want. So let's just go ahead and unfilter those. So now we have only selected, very similar to our folder on our local machine, we now only have the files that we want from our SharePoint site or from our local files. So now what we're ready to do is we're ready to now do the combining. So I didn't want to do the combine part because I wanted to show you those steps. So now once we've got everything filtered for down to the files that we want within the folder, now we're ready to combine those files. So what the combine option does is it's essentially like a built-in Power BI Power Query step that's going to transform all of these files into a similar file that's going to be an output of all of the files appended onto each other. So I'll show you what that means. So once we're here, let's go ahead and push on these 2 arrows that says combine file. Push on those guys, and what this is going to do is this is going to give us another window pop up that's going to tell us how, or we can specify how we want to combine our files. So we're going to use our first file as a sample, and you usually don't really need to change anything on here. So once this comes up, we're just going to combine the files. All of the files are going to be in the exact same format, so we don't need to adjust anything. All of those files are perfect to just combine into each other. And then great, so up here you can see what it just created for us. I didn't create this. This was automatically generated. So this is just a simple step that Power BI does, Power Query does. It just transformed all of our files into one big file. So now we've just got everything, and you can see here this is kind of what it did. So it went from, we started on a source, this is where we started, then we filtered for, this is a part of the function that it did. It invoked a custom function, renamed stuff, and then you can just kind of follow those steps as you go. So great, so now we've got all of our files. You can see as we scroll through here, we'll have those file names differently, right? So there's November 25, there's November 24 up top, November 26, right? So now we've got all of our files into one table. Now what we need to do is get this table reportable. And the biggest thing this is missing is just a date relationship. So we have no date on our file, so we don't know what date these users did this various activity, right? But a part of our automation process contains naming the file for the day's activity for what we're grabbing the data for, right? So within our file, each date is for the day of the activity that happened. So this 11/24, I know that this file was for the November 24th, 2022 day's activity that all of these users did for that day. So what I can do is I can use a transform step to right-click on this column. I will add a column from examples. And what this is going to do is this is Microsoft's AI engine that's going to it's going to try to recognize what you want to do off of the selected columns that you've chosen. So I've only chosen source name here. And it's going to, if I type in 2022 11/24 in the same format that it has listed in its name, and I press enter, it's going to try to recognize what I'm doing. So what it's trying to say is what the AI engine has picked up I'm trying to do is it's trying to say that based off of what I've entered in its example, is it's thinking that I want to take the text between these two so the text between underscores, I want to ignore the first two underscores. So we'll ignore this underscore, we'll ignore this underscore, we're starting here, get the text between there, and then end at that one, right? So we're getting a date right there. So with column from example, I don't know what this code does. I didn't know how to type it, but Microsoft's AI was able to understand what I needed to do by just typing it in. So easy peasy activity. Let's rename that and go ahead and push OK. And so now if we look in our activity date column, let's go ahead and make this a date as well. Let's load more. We can now see that we've got all of our daily dates of activities. Voila, there you go. So it's that easy. And then once we've got our dates, that is all we needed to do to get our report reportable, right? So now let's go ahead and load this data in. And so again, the same exact thing would be possible on our SharePoint site. So once we've got our SharePoint site, we would just combine the content. Same thing, I don't need to run through it again, but it's literally the exact same steps because it's the exact same folder structure. So let's go ahead and just delete this one and load our data in and just show you guys what this looks like on the page really quick. So we just went from a huge folder structure that had no consistency to it. We could only report on one file's data to now we have an entire folder structure in our model. Our model will refresh daily whenever there's a new file within that folder, and we never have to touch it again. Nice and easy. So again, our date table will just relate to our activity date. And then once we've got that, let's go ahead and just throw something on the page here. So if we get month and year, and let's see how many profiles each of our users are looking at. I think that's a thing, right? Profiles viewed. So there you go. So every day we now have a file for the daily LinkedIn activity, which is able to produce us counts for each user across dates for those data points. So if I put the date underneath, I can drill down into the specific month, February, and I can see user 13 on this day checked out 59 profiles, right? And we can just kind of keep looking through that data and see all of those different users that people have selected. So it's pretty cool with what Power Query can do. Very powerful stuff, super easy. You're able to kind of just pull out some amazing data, get it reportable, and get it how you need it to be. So let me know if you guys have any specific examples of data that you are having issues with getting reportable. Would be happy to help you out to get it reportable. Join the Discord or something, throw me a sample file or something, and I can get a little tutorial on how you can transform your data into something reportable. Let me know if this helped you guys. Hope it did, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.